What's going on, everybody? Future Rail Productions here, and here's another review. This is the review of the LionChief Plus with Bluetooth Nickel Plate Road Berkshire number 767. Before I get started on this review, I want to go over a little bit of history about this type of engine. This locomotive is designated as a 284 type locomotive, meaning 2 lead wheels underneath the pilot, 8 drive wheels, and 4 trailing wheels to support the firebox. In the United States of America, the 284 wheel arrangement was a further development of the enormously successful United States Railroad Administration USRA 282 Mikado. It resulted from the requirement for a locomotive with even greater steam heating capacity. To produce more steam, a solution was to increase the size of the locomotive's firebox, but the 282 wheel arrangement with its single axle trailing truck limited the permissible increased axle loading from a larger firebox. The practical solution was to add a second trailing axle to spread the increased weight over a larger firebox over both axles. The first American 284s were built for the Boston and Albany Railroad in 1925 by the Lionel Locomotive Works. The railroad's route across the Berkshire Mountains was a substantial test for the new locomotives, and as a result, the name Berkshire, or Berkshire depending on how you pronounce it, was adopted for the locomotive type. Although the Berkshire Mountain Range lent its name to the locomotive type, the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad preferred the name Kanoa, I don't know how to pronounce that, for their 284s. Buoyed by the successful of the demonstrations on the B&A, Lima and Alco both sold a few hundred of the new locomotive type. The Berkshire's type's big boost came in 1934 when the New York, Chicago, and St. Louis Railroad, otherwise known as the Nickel Plate Railroad, or the Nickel Plate Road, received its first 284s, built to a new design from the Advisory Mechanical Committee, AMC, of the Van Schwergen Empire? I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Under the umbrella of the Van Schwergen Empire, they had the Nickel Plate Road, the Erie Railroad, Chesapeake and Ohio Railway, and the Pere Marquette Railway. The AMC's design generated 64,100 pounds force of tractive effort and became the standard design for subsequent Berkshires. The Erie Railroad purchased the largest number of 284s, rostering 105. Lima's last steam locomotive was also the last American 284, the Nickel Plate Road number 779 of 1949. Some 700 284s were built for American service, constituting 2% of the steam fleet prior to dieselization and delivering 5% of the nation's freight ton miles. Now that you know a little bit of history on the real-life Berkshires, let's talk about this model. Now, a neat little tidbit about this locomotive, its design is actually from a post-war locomotive from the 1940s called the 726 Berkshire, although I believe it's the 1947 variation design, as the original design had shorter had a shorter sandbox and different details compared to the 1947 version. Starting with the front of the engine, we have the nice detailed cast-in cow catcher with a nice air hose there, a fake coupler, and on the front of the pilot we have 2 flag stanchions, here and here. Moving up from the cow catcher, we have the nice detailed smokebox door with the headlamp on it and the 767, the externally applied handrails here, and then also the front of the smokebox door opens to reveal the interior of the engine, although I'm not sure it's detailed. That would have been a nice touch if it was. You got this wire here to deal with for the headlamp, and then it's held in place by a magnet. Pretty cool. Moving up from the smokebox door, we have the marker lights. Now, these marker lights are not operational, they're just green gems. Moving to the side of the engine, you can see the externally applied handrail running up and back towards the cab. Here on the side of the engine, you can also see the legible builder's plates. The red one here reads Lionel Locomotive Works, Incorporated, and it says September 1944, so the engine was built in September of 1944. And then you got this little black one here, I can barely read that, and then over here you got it built by a Lionel one. Moving farther down the side of the engine, you can see the externally applied handrail running all the way back towards the cab, as well as the running gear, and it's very nicely detailed. Something else I've noticed is Lionel actually stamped Baldwin disc into the counterweights on the drivers. So I guess that's a neat little way to honor the original 726 Berkshire from 1946. Moving back to the cab of the engine, we have a nice detailed firebox with some cast-in piping, and then we have a nice crisp 767. Moving to the top of the engine, we have the smoke unit, and to load smoke fluid into the smoke unit, you simply pour it down the stack. Moving back from the smokestack, we have the bell, and it does kind of swing back and forth here. Behind that, we have the sand dome, and it has the initials for the nickel plate road, NYC and STL, standing for New York, Chicago, and St. Louis. Moving back down the top of the engine, we have some more cast-in details. We have 3 pop-off valves here, and the separately applied whistle. On top of the cab, we have a nice detailed roof. We have some rivet detail here, and 3 cast-in vents, and they do not open. Here on the back head of the engine, we have a nicely detailed cab. We have some cast-in detail here, and the firebox here, and inside the firebox there's a flickering light when the engine is in operation. Here's a quick look down the left side of the engine, and you can see it's pretty much the same as the right side. Here's a quick look on the underside of the engine. We have 2 contact rollers, one here and one here, and underneath the trailing truck we have 2 switches, one for the smoke on and off and one for the sounds on and off, and on the other side we have a switch for the option between conventional transformer control or the remote control. Going lower below the cab, we have the drawbar, which allows the electronics in the engine to communicate with the electronics in the tender. Now that we reviewed the engine, let's review the tender. On the front of the tender, it's modestly detailed. We have a nice cast-in step here that goes all the way up to here, a nice little platform with some safety tread, some externally applied handrails, and then here we have the receiving socket for the drawbar that allows the electronics in the tender to communicate with the electronics in the engine. On the side of the tender, we have a nice crisp nickel plate road along with the road's initials and some nice rivet detail all around. On top of the tender, we have a nice cast-in coal load, some externally applied handrails here, and a cast-in water hatch. On the back of the engine, we have a nice casted-in ladder here, some externally applied handrails here and here, some nice lettering here, a nice crisp 767, some details on how many gallons of water and how many tons of coal the tender can hold, and the ElectroCoupler, which can be fired from the LionChief remote or the Bluetooth app. Also on the back of the tender, we have a nice stamped-in Lionel logo. Here's a quick look on the underside of the tender, and you can see it's modestly detailed. You got the truck side frames here, and then here's the speaker for the sound effects. Now it's time for BFIMO, best feature in my opinion. Well, there's a lot of features that I like with this engine, but my favorite feature of this locomotive is the LionChief remote. They have actually updated it from the original remote setup, and I love the new update they did with it. Well, let's get this thing fired up. Here we go, fire up. Now as you can see, the engine is whistling. Now that could be for a number of reasons, lost connection or anything like that, but the most common one is that the remote is off. So to turn the engine on, you simply throw the switch on the remote. Like that. As you can see on the video, the engine also has an idle smoke function. It's something the earlier LionChief engines did not have. There's the flickering light I told you about earlier that was in the cab. Okay, let's try the whistle. Here's the bell. Now this engine also has crew talk, and I know some people don't like the crew talk. Here's my advice. If you don't want to hear the crew talk, just don't hit the crew talk button. Anyways, here's some of the crew talk. Depending on how long the engine has been sitting, different lines will play.
You are clear to depart on signal indication. Thank you much. This is the operator. Please hold at your location. Roger. Standing by.
Now this engine also has manual volume control. To change the volume, you simply press and hold the announcement key and then turn the throttle wheel. But be sure to turn the throttle wheel back to 0, otherwise the engine will take off. And you can hear it's quiet now. That's full volume, and then you release, volume set, and then you rotate the wheel back to 0. You can also fire the coupler with the remote as well by holding the shift key and hitting the reverse coupler button. Okay, I got a train together, but keep in mind I have a diesel on the back, so this is what like 765 would be having if she was having trouble getting up a hill or something. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on out.
You are cleared to depart on signal indication. Thank you much. Are we clear through the diamond? Clear through my limit. Dispatcher, train is outbound. Copy that. Have a safe run. Are we still clear all the way? Keep rolling out.
Now I'm going to show you how to connect the engine to Bluetooth. So the LionChief app can be used on pretty much any device. It can be used on Android, iPad, iPhone, or iPod Touch as I have here. But I recommend using the Apple version of the app because the Android version is full of bugs right now. But anyways, to connect the engine to Bluetooth, you go to your settings on your device. You go to your Bluetooth, turn on your Bluetooth. Now the engine's on, the Bluetooth is on, so then you want to back out, go to your LionChief app, and this is what it looks like. You want to click here, where it says no collecting locomotive. There's the locomotive. I click it, gives me the data on it, and I click this button to link it. And now it's connected. Okay, here's the whistle. Here's the bell. Here's the announcements.
Your route is lined. Good on signal indication. Roger that. All clear ahead.
Here's the coupler. And there's the throttle, which we'll use in a minute. One cool thing about the app is that you can actually change the sound settings on the engine, and they save to the remote when you go back to the remote, and they won't change until you go back and change them. If you click this here, you have 5 sliders here. You have whistle, bell, announcements, and chuffing sounds, and then the overall master volume. And up here you can change the pitch of both the whistle and the bell, like so. If I pull it down, you can change this whistle to a deeper sound. Back to neutral, the original sound. Going up. You can do the same thing with the bell. And back to neutral. Also with the LionChief app, you have different speed settings. So here you have a speed limit. This will restrict how fast the engine will go, which makes it perfect for kids, so the kids don't drive the train off the table and break it. Here you got a momentum setting, so this basically will tell the engine how fast to accelerate or how slow to accelerate. So low, it'll accelerate slowly, medium acceleration, and then high acceleration. And then you also have the smoke unit, which if I press it, it turns the smoke unit on. And then I hit it again, and it turns it off. Also with the engine, you can set the direction with this button here. So it's in forward, and now it's in reverse, and forward again. Okay, let's move her on out. That's it for this review. I hope you guys enjoyed. This engine is a bunch of fun to run. The details are amazing. The sounds are amazing. It's absolutely wonderful. And I'm going to get it turned into nickel plate road 765. I'm going to add a whole bunch of detail to it. So it's going to be cool looking when that's done. If you're interested in picking one of these up, the retail price is $449.99. But if you go through a good Lionel dealer, you could probably get a little bit of a discount. Well, that's it for this review. I hope you enjoyed. I'm Future Rail Productions, and I'll see you next time.